Namaste and welcome, beloved, mighty companions.
Namaste y bienvenidos, amados compañeros.
And such a helpful topic tonight. We're going to have Jesus talk to us about why not following. How come we have to really see that is the desire to keep guilt alive in the mind.
Qué maravilloso tópico vamos a ver esta noche. El deseo de... can you tell me what the subject? Sorry.
The subject is, if not following, is the desire to keep guilt.
Si no sigo la guía, es el deseo de mantener la culpa.
There's so much love behind this.
Hay muchísimo amor detrás de esto.
Because the whole point of the ego is to avoid the divine expression of all the love there is.
Y el juego del ego es negar la... Sorry.
It's the divine expression of all the love that is, and the ego is going to try and avoid that.
El ego va a tratar de evadir que la luz del ser divino es todo lo que es.
So we have to see this. It's so important to see this, because then you'll see what you're saying no to when you don't make following him a top priority.
Y tienes que decir no, porque tu prioridad número uno tiene que ser seguirlo.
And you'll just be led around the block. We've been talking about how a bull has a ring in its nose.
Y tenemos que dejar es como la vaca que lleva un anillo en la nariz.
And how we love the play in consciousness, the play of consciousness of the ego is to feel that we're pulled around like having a ring. We're powerless to being pulled around by our nose, by the ego.
Es como que nos lleva arrastrándonos desde el ego. Ese es el juego de la conciencia, nos lleva arrastrándonos desde ese anillo.
We're getting this double Jesus.
Esto es un doble Jesús.
Okay. As I've said, we think in the play of consciousness, it looks like someone's translating, but there's no one to translate. There's only the voice of God speaking.
Pareciera en el juego de la conciencia que son dos, uno traduciendo al otro, pero realmente somos uno.
It's only
la voz de Dios hablando.
It's only hearing God in stereo.
Es solo escuchando la voz de Dios en estéreo.
So in the play of consciousness, the play of the desire to deny love, following Jesus is the lowest of the low priority.
En el juego de la conciencia es importante que tengamos como prioridad seguir a Jesús.
And if you're in the beginning, it is essential to be with mighties that do not compromise.
In
the beginning,
al comienzo es importantísimo tener compañeros que no vayan a transigir.
Okay, because the play is to compromise.
Porque el juego es transigir.
To compromise the kingdom of heaven, supreme happiness.
Transigir ante el reino de los cielos, nuestro reino.
So we'll hear guidance, because everyone can hear guidance.
Aquí escuchamos la guía como lo puede escuchar cualquiera.
Now the ego is going to play.
Sorry, todos lo pueden escuchar.
Now the ego is going to play like it can't hear.
Y el ego va a jugar que no puedo escuchar.
I can't hear you, Jesus.
No te puedo escuchar, Jesús.
Yeah, there's some kind of static on the line.
Tengo como estática en el teléfono.
When we say we can't hear, that means I don't want to hear.
Cuando decimos no puedo escuchar, decimos no quiero escuchar.
And that's why we join here, so that we can hear it. And you can, the clearer the mind gets from forgiveness, the more you'll see how everyone can hear who wants God.
Y en, sorry.
So the more that's release of those subconscious desires from the mind to deny guidance,
entre más vamos aclarando esos deseos subconscientes, la luz va siendo, la guía va siendo más clara.
the more you'll start to see and recognize that everyone can hear this voice, and you'll start hearing things together.
Y te comienzas a dar cuenta que todos podemos escuchar la guía y la escuchamos muy claro cuando estamos juntos.
So the challenge is never not hearing.
Y el reto es never
not being able to hear.
Es no estar dispuesto a escuchar.
Okay, it's always the decision in the mind not to hear the divine voice that's our voice.
El juego de la conciencia es no escuchar la guía.
Okay. So when we start with the realization that it's not that we can't hear, it's that we don't want to hear.
Cuando nos damos cuenta de que no es que no podamos escuchar la guía, sino que no queremos escuchar la guía.
See, I knew that there were times I was at a certain point you become so committed to following Jesus.
Y en algún punto te vuelves muy comprometido a seguir la voz de Jesús.
Because it means if you do not follow 100%, that means you want to block God out of your mind.
If
you don't commit to following 100%,
si no te comprometes a seguirlo 100%,
that means there's a play in the mind to try and keep guilt.
Es una parte de tu mente que quiere mantener la culpa.
That's to keep the meaning that you've given the world.
Es mantener el significado que le has dado al mundo.
So as we're turning in to look and release all the desires to deny ourselves,
es mantenerse
as we're releasing these desires with Jesus,
es mantenernos liberando estos deseos con Jesús.
As we're releasing those, you'll hear and you'll see. I just knew if I just kept releasing them, that those desires were the desire not to hear the voice.
Vamos limpiando esos deseos y vamos limpiando el deseo de no querer escuchar la voz.
So in order to be free, he gives the assignments. Follow me and I'll show you how to release the blocks to the awareness of love.
En el orden de what?
Follow me and I'll show you how to release the blocks to love.
Él nos dice, sígueme y yo te ayudaré a liberar estos deseos que bloquean la voz.
Now the ego is going to do everything it can to keep guilt and suffering.
The ego,
is going to do everything it can to keep guilt and suffering.
El ego va a hacer todo lo que sea para mantener la culpa y el sufrimiento.
It's a guilt machine.
Es una máquina de culpa.
So it's going to make hearing Jesus very, very low on the priority list.
Y va a querer que pongamos muy abajo de las prioridades escuchar a Jesús.
So you can ask him, Jesus, if I can't hear you, am I making a bunch of excuses not to hear you? If I can't hear you, Jesus, am I making a lot of excuses?
Si no te puedo escuchar, Jesús, ¿es que estoy haciendo una cantidad de excusas para no hacerlo?
Not to hear you.
No, para no escucharte.
And you can ask him, Jesus, if I'm not hearing you, I'm avoiding hearing you.
Si no te estoy escuchando, Jesús, es porque te estoy evadiendo.
And I'm wanting to keep guilt in my mind.
Y queriendo mantener la culpa en mi mente.
It's very illuminating to hear him tell you that.
Y es muy iluminador escuchar eso.
So the ego has a two-step plan. It's going to hear the voice and then it's going to deny that it heard it.
El ego va a jugar que escucha la voz y luego va a negar que la escucha.
And it's going to hear it. It's going to deny it's heard it. And then it's not going to follow.
Y luego no la va a seguir.
And that not following is to keep guilt alive in the mind.
Y no seguir es querer mantener la culpa en la mente.
To not follow is self-punishment.
Y no seguir es un autocastigo.
So the way it plays is that it will hear it. The play will be, you'll hear the voice. Well, first of all, you pretend like you don't hear it. That's the first play.
El primer juego del ego es que juega a que no la escuchas.
Okay, and then the doubt thoughts. Is that really it? Am I really hearing Jesus? All these sort of plays come up.
Y luego viene la duda. ¿Será que lo estoy escuchando? ¿Será que es el ego?
If the desire is there to transcend personal identity, you will make a beeline.
Y si tu deseo es trascender, ¿trascend what?
A beeline. You'll make a direct path to the nearest mighty companion who does not compromise.
Y vas a tener que tener una línea directa con tus compañeros que no transingen.
And just say, I would like to have real clarity on what my guidance is.
Y
I want absolute clarity on my guidance.
Y quiero absoluta claridad en la guía.
See, the ego is not going to do that. It's going to go, oh, I heard it. Or it's going to hunt around till it finds a seemingly mighty companion that has the same fear. So it'll agree.
Si no, el ego va a tratar de conseguir compañeros que tengan el mismo miedo.
It's not going to choose the one that is going to be the reflection of uncompromising following.
Y no va a escoger al que realmente no quiere transigir, sino
que
transigue.
Well, it's going to avoid that reflection.
Y va a evadir esa reflexión, esa proyección.
So this is why it's really important and valuable to ask Jesus who to join with on, not only on the guidance, okay, to hear it more clearly, but who is it I'm to join with to hear the most clearly.
Por eso es que es importante preguntarle a Jesús con quién me debo unir.
The ego's really tricky. It'll go, oh, I joined.
Porque el ego es muy engañador. Siempre te dice, sí, unámonos, pero va a querer que sea con el que quiere.
If the desire of the heart, the deepest desire is to follow Jesus, then you will find a way to follow him.
Si tu deseo profundo es seguir a Jesús, vas a lograr hacerlo.
Everyone can hear Jesus who wants to hear Jesus.
Todos pueden escuchar a Jesús.
So it's a two-part plan. Hear the voice, which we know many can hear the voice.
Son dos partes del plan. Uno, escuchar la voz.
Everyone can hear the voice.
Todos podemos escuchar la voz.
There's no exceptions.
No hay excepciones.
So the exception would be the desire not to hear
it. La única excepción es el deseo de no querer escuchar la voz.
The desire not to hear it is the desire to keep the guilt in the mind, to be guilty.
Y el deseo de no seguir es el deseo de mantener la culpa.
The only point of the voice is to show us that we're not guilty at all.
Y el único punto de la guía es mostrarnos que no hay culpa de nada.
So the commitment to hear and then the commitment to get clarity.
El compromiso de escuchar la guía y
hear the voice, the commitment to hear it, I'm going to hear it.
Okay. El compromiso de escuchar la voz, voy a escucharla.
And you see, your level of determination will show up by how much you join to get clarity on your guidance.
Y el compromiso se demuestra en cuánto me quiero unir.
To be clear on what your next step is.
Para estar claro en cuál es el siguiente paso.
Okay, so that's the first thing that will show up. You just go out of your way to make sure you're following guidance.
Y este es el primer punto que hay que seguir.
So there are many that can hear the voice because it's natural.
Y porque todos pueden escuchar, es muy natural escuchar la voz.
So not hearing is the desire to keep guilt in the mind.
Y no escuchar la voz es el deseo, y no sé qué es el deseo de mantener la culpa.
Step 2
El
is
segundo paso es
follow the voice.
sigue la guía.
See, the ego thinks, oh, I'm free, I'm safe as long as I don't hear that voice. See,
El ego va a decir, apenas no escuche la voz, va a decir, estoy libre.
it's throwing a little keep hell party.
Es querer mantener como la fiesta del infierno.
Fiesta. A fiesta what? Of hell. What's hell?
Infierno.
Inferno. A fiesta inferno. That's what it likes. Ask Jesus. Fiesta. Yes. Okay. So, and I'm so grateful to Helen. I can hardly speak it how much I love her and appreciate her. Helen, the scribe, you know.
No puedo decir cuánto aprecio a Helen.
But Jesus would have carried her all the way through. But if she hears him and she doesn't listen to him all the time, it's a lesson for all of us. If Helen hears him or any of us hear him and we don't follow him.
Okay. Es como Helen, que ella escuchaba la voz pero no la seguía.
It's keeping guilt in the mind.
Es mantener la culpa en la mente.
It's the desire to stay guilty and small.
Es el deseo de mantenernos culpables y pequeños.
So you can ask him, so we can be totally clear that not following is keeping guilt.
Vamos a estar claros. No seguir la guía es querer mantener la culpa.
Not joining is keeping guilt.
No unirnos es mantener la culpa.
See, all these things are made to delay the correction.
Todo esto lo que hace es demorar la corrección.
And you can just watch it happen. The ego is going to find a little way to go off by itself so it can keep how mad it is.
Sorry,
the ego is going to go off somewhere else.
El ego va a querer ir a otro lado.
It's going to try to change the situation.
Va a querer tratar de cambiar de situación.
Make cookies, whatever it does.
Hacer galletas, cualquier cosa.
Instead of listening to Jesus and following the voice within.
En lugar de escuchar y seguir la voz de Jesús.
Is making these cookies most helpful for healing the mind.
Es hacer estas galletas más útil para la sanación de la mente.
And chances are, if you're really in a mad state, Jesus will not be having you making cookies. If you're really mad, he's not going to send you in the kitchen to do cookies. He's going to send you to join with a brother.
Si tú estás muy molesto, Jesús no te va a mandar a la cocina a hacer galletas. Te va a mandar a que te unas con un hermano.
Okay, so here are the joining signals for joining.
He aquí las señales para unirse.
Okay, it's called fight, flight, or freeze. Fight.
Sí, las señales son pelear.
Flight.
Volar.
Running.
Salir corriendo.
Or freeze.
O quedarnos paralizados.
Okay, and my favorite dogs going to the vet video.
Y por eso mi favorita es la del video de los perritos que van al veterinario.
Okay, where the dog just splays out on the grass and they have to try to drag the dog. That's freezing.
Es cuando el perrito se tira al piso y no quiere que lo lleven. Eso es estar paralizado.
Okay, or the dog, you have to practice, it wants to run the other direction.
Y el otro es el que quiere salir corriendo en dirección opuesta.
And it chops off all the joining with the mighties that it feels is a threat. Chop off, it cuts off connection.
Corta todos los encuentros con sus compañeros.
Okay, and the way it does that, it's like, I got to leave right now.
Tengo que irme ahora mismo.
And it changes the visual field. I'm going to go look for a new place that's better than this one because all these people here, they're a problem.
Y mejor me voy para otro lugar donde I go to another place to.
Yeah, just avoidance. Just
solo para
take
evadir.
A train, a plane.
Toma un tren o un avión para huir.
I'm getting the heck out of here.
Tengo que largarme de aquí.
Okay, so that's so it does not yield to Jesus. See, when Jesus gives you an assignment, that's so he's taking over time and space.
Cuando Jesús te da una asignatura, Él se encarga del tiempo y el espacio.
So when you say no and he's giving you an assignment to go somewhere or do something, you're keeping guilt because you're refusing to look with him to see what's true.
Y cuando te rehusas a seguir la asignatura, vas a mantener esa culpa.
Okay, so there's freeze, there's running.
Entonces es quedarnos congelados, salir corriendo.
Or there's fighting. I want to beat the crap out of my brother.
O la otra es pelear, luchar.
And then freeze can show up all kinds of ways.
Y de quedarnos paralizados hay muchas formas.
It's all rage. It just shows up in a bunch of different ways to disguise itself in consciousness.
Es ira, todo lo que hay en el subconsciente.
And each one of those positions is always trying to keep guilt and not accept the correction quickly.
Y todas estas posiciones que tomamos es para mantener la culpa en la mente y no aceptar la sanación.
So when Jesus, so there's all kinds of levels here where the ego's one going to block the voice.
Y hay muchos niveles, es como la forma de bloquear la voz.
2, it's going to act like it's a kerfuffle and I don't know what's really true and I don't know what the voice is. It'll play like that.
Y otra es como el ruido,
yeah, like a kerfuffle. It just gets lost and I'm not sure I'm hearing Jesus. And
como estar perdidos, no sé si estoy escuchando a Jesús.
Okay, and all of that is a flat out no to guidance.
Y esa es una forma de decirle no a Dios,
a
la guía.
And avoiding to actually hear and follow what Jesus is trying to say.
Y evadir lo que Jesús nos dice y nos guía.
So we can hear, and if we want to hear, and you're dedicated to hearing, you will hear.
Si tú realmente tienes la voluntad y la dedicación de escuchar, tú lo escucharás.
You will find a way to join with a brother. If you really, really want to release guilt from the mind, you will find a way to do it with Jesus.
Si realmente quieres liberar tu mente de la culpa, Jesús te va a ayudar en esto.
And it takes commitment.
Y exige esto exige compromiso.
You remember, let thine eye be single for God and his kingdom. Let thine eye be single. One eye.
Yeah, okay. Deja que tu ojo sea singular.
Okay, for the kingdom of heaven.
Por el reino de los cielos.
So it seems like the ego is going to make it seem like no big deal not to follow.
El ego te va a hacer ver como que no es gran problema no seguir la voz.
You will hear clearly, and then you'll hear it with a brother, and you can watch this play. And within 10 minutes, you'll be going, oh, Jesus didn't tell me that.
Y puedes escuchar muy bien la voz y a los 10 minutos vas a estar diciendo, no, yo creo que Jesús no me dijo eso.
I didn't hear that guidance.
No, yo no escuché esa guía.
Because that's the way it plays.
Porque así juega.
You know, it's like Jesus when he gives guidance, he does not change his mind.
Y cuando Jesús nos da guía, él no cambia su mente, no cambia su decisión.
So the ego, which is the play to keep guilt, is gonna.
Y el ego
it's a play to keep guilt.
Y el juego del ego es tratar de mantener la culpa.
But if you want to hear him, you're going to hear him. Those that can hear. Remember, he said that.
Recuerden, él lo dijo, el que quiera escuchar, escuchará.
I'm asking him right now, Jesus, do you change your mind on guidance? No, he doesn't.
Jesús, ¿tú cambias tu decisión en la guía? Y la respuesta es no, él no lo hace.
See, the ego will go back and forth, and I'm not sure it's the guidance, and I'm not sure what I'm doing, until it finally, go for the play of weakness, and you give in and you don't follow.
Y el ego va a jugar de como ir adelante, ir atrás, pero todo para no seguir la guía.
And that's the play to keep guilt in the mind.
Y ese es el juego para mantener la culpa en la mente.
So anything that you, because you're a powerful infinite being,
Porque tú eres un ser poderoso,
you make the decision that the only thing that's valuable to you to hear that voice and to follow that voice,
y si tú haces el compromiso de seguir y escuchar y seguir la voz,
all the power of heaven behind you,
todo el poder del cielo estará contigo.
all the power of heaven behind you.
O todo el poder del cielo estará contigo.
And that's the kind of conviction that it takes. I'm going to hear that voice and I'm going to follow that voice no matter what.
Y ese es el compromiso que hay que tener. Voy a escuchar la voz y voy a seguir la voz, no importa qué.
Because what you're saying is, I am honoring myself as a divine being and no longer willing to hang on to guilt and suffering.
Es honrar en nuestro ser y no seguir con el juego de la culpa y del sufrimiento.
And we're worth it. He's talking supreme happiness here.
Él está hablándonos aquí de suprema felicidad.
That's our one function, he's saying. That's your one function, supreme happiness.
Esa es tu función, suprema felicidad.
But
Es la
this-
única función.
So the play is, here's how the ego, it's so sneaky.
El ego es so sneaky. What is sneaky?
Sneaky is tricky.
Ok, es todo tramposo, todo como sí.
Because we made it that way.
Porque
To trick
nosotros,
ourselves.
con nosotros lo hicimos así. Y nos gusta engañarnos a nosotros mismos.
So let's go for honesty of God.
Vamos entonces con la honestidad de Dios.
Okay, check in, is the light here?
Y chequeamos si está la luz aquí.
Okay, so let's be honest. Ask Jesus, do I really relish not hearing your voice well?
Y en la honestidad de Dios le vamos a preguntar a Jesús, ¿en realidad disfruto no escuchar tu voz?
Do I? When you hear the yes, it's a good thing.
Y escuchamos un sí.
Do I just really love the play of obscuring the voice for God?
¿Realmente disfruto oscurecer la voz de Dios?
And just listen. When he tells you yes,
Y cuando escuchamos sí.
be grateful, because now you can really see and admit the play.
Y entonces debes estar agradecido porque ahora puedes then you
can really start to see what the play is in the mind.
Y luego te vas a poder dar cuenta de cuál es el juego en la mente, en la conciencia.
And then start getting really, really honest with Jesus so he can help you find your way out.
Y ahí puedes comenzar a ser muy honesto con Jesús para que Jesús te pueda mostrar la vía de salida.
So go ahead and ask him so we can all be clear. Jesus, am I addicted to guilt?
Y vamos a preguntarle a Jesús. Jesús, ¿soy un adicto a la culpa?
Do I relish guilt above God?
¿Disfruto la culpa más que Dios? Por encima de Dios.
And I'm asking him about the last, my favorite thing is the last unanswered question.
Y mi tema favorito es la última pregunta no contestada.
And the honesty of God is that if you relish guilt, you will not be able to say yes to the last unanswered question.
Si tú realmente disfrutas la culpa, va a ser muy difícil que digas sí a la última pregunta no contestada.
Am I willing to see what's been denied because it's the truth?
Estoy dispuesto a ver lo que es verdad.
Am I willing to see what's been denied because it's the truth?
Estoy dispuesto a ver lo que es verdad. Sorry, can you say parts?
Am I willing to see what's been denied
Estoy dispuesto a ver lo que he negado
because it's the truth?
porque es la verdad.
Now he'll say you'll answer it yes sometimes and no other times.
Yeah, algunas veces contesta sí y otras veces no.
That's because guilt is still relished in the mind.
Es porque aún estás disfrutando la culpa en tu mente.
The delusion, every time we don't follow, it's a desire to dive deeper in the dream.
Y cada vez que no lo sigues, realmente es un deseo de irte profundo en el sueño, go deeper
in the dream.
En el sueño.
And we have to see that. We have to see that we have always the power to hear him.
Y tenemos que ver que nosotros tenemos el poder
Clearly like a bell, clearly like a bell ringing.
Como, claro como el sonido de una campana.
So they have to go together though. You can't just hear, you got to follow unequivocally.
Mira, no puede ir solo, o sea, tienes que escuchar la guía y seguirla. Eso debe ser inequívoco.
And that's what the ego doesn't want to do because it relishes guilt and keeping guilt in the mind.
Y porque, oye, eso no lo va a querer el ego, porque él quiere mantener la culpa en la mente.
See, the recognition of identity and the love of the Father,
el reconocimiento de nuestra identidad y del amor del Padre,
supreme happiness,
de la suprema felicidad,
depends on unequivocal,
depende del inequívoco,
saying yes to the last unanswered question.
Decir sí a la última pregunta no contestada.
And saying yes to the last unanswered question
y decir sí a la última pregunta no contestada
means that not the tiniest scrap of the mind will you allow to be hidden from Jesus.
Y significa que ni la más pequeña parte de la mente, part of the mind,
you will not hide anything from Jesus. You show all of it.
No vas a ocultarle nada a Jesús.
Meaning that you will allow him to show you, because you've hidden from yourself, you'll allow him to show you
vas a permitir que él te muestre
what you've hidden from yourself.
Lo que estás escondiendo de ti mismo.
Private thoughts.
Los pensamientos privados.
Meaning the thoughts that you're holding, that
los pensamientos que estás reteniendo.
To keep the ego glued together.
Para mantener el ego vivo.
The thoughts that need to be released to the light of truth.
Los pensamientos tienen que ser revelados a la luz.
Llevados a la luz. The thoughts and special concepts that are being kept to hold that guilt glue together.
Y esos deseos que hemos tenido mantenidos ocultos.
The guilt, the glue of sticky.
Como el pegamento que tiene pegada a la culpa.
To try to keep guilt and suffering below the level of awareness, that desire for it.
Mantener la culpa por debajo del nivel de conciencia.
So I could see, like, it was just on a low burner, just the back burner, you know, when you just have something on a slow cook on the back burner of your stove, the top of your stove, and you just kind of put it and it just lets it simmer on the back stove of the stove, a pot, and you're cooking something.
Cuando estás cocinando algo, tú dejas algo.
You just put a pot on the back burner of your stove to cook.
Y como que lo pones en un segundo nivel para que se cocine.
Like no rush.
Como que no hay prisa.
That's what happened with most course students having to do with following Jesus' guidance.
Y eso es lo que pasa con muchos de los estudiantes para seguir la guía.
With hearing and following.
Para escuchar y seguir la guía.
And teachers too, a lot of teachers of the course.
Y muchos profesores de un curso.
See, a teacher of God follows Jesus.
Si un maestro, un profesor sigue a Jesús.
He lives Jesus.
Y vive a Jesús.
Your happiness depends on it.
Tu felicidad depende de eso.
Otherwise, it's really keeping the addiction to guilt alive in the mind.
Y si no es mantener la adicción a mantener la culpa en la mente.
And you will do whatever he asks because you'll see he is the way out.
Y harás todo lo que él te pida porque tú sabes que esa es la única salida.
He is the way, the truth, and the life in the mind.
Esa es la luz de la verdad.
So that you can see you're the way, the truth, the life. So you can see that you are the way, the truth, and the life.
Tú tienes que darte cuenta que tú eres la verdad y la luz.
The life with a capital L.
con mayúscula.
all that is.
Todo lo que es.
So he keeps pointing back, if you do not want guilt, if you want to let guilt go, then you'll join with your brother a lot.
Si no quieres mantener la culpa, tienes que unirte con tu hermano.
And he's reminding me, it can't be overemphasized. This cannot be overemphasized, what he's telling me.
Lo que él me está diciendo, me está recordando que no puedo enfatizar demasiado.
So you hear the assignment that he gives.
Tú escuchas la asignación que es
and
que
you
te da,
stay with it all the way through.
y estás con él toda la vía.
The ego is going to do everything it can to uproot you from staying with your assignment with Jesus.
Y el ego va a hacer todo para que no lo hagas.
It's going to kick up all kinds of dust and defenses and projections.
Y va a haber muchas defensas y muchas proyecciones.
It's going to, derail you from the beings that you're assigned to be with for the healing of the mind. It's going to derail, it's going to find a way to get you away from those that are most...
Sí, va a tratar de sacarte como del camino de seguir la guía y la asignatura.
And you just watch it, how the ego will come in and then it wants to keep the world very badly. So it's not going to want to be around those mighty companions that are going to lead it out of the world.
Sorry.
The ego does not want to stay around mighty companions that are committed to leave the world.
Y el ego no va a querer que estés con compañeros que quieran salir de la ilusión.
So it holds on to the grievance rather than join with those mighties with the commitment to go all the way.
Y va a mantener las los remordimientos y las Meli, los agravios para no seguir.
So it takes commitment to ourselves as a divine being.
Say it again, sorry.
It takes commitments to ourselves as a divine being.
Sí, exige compromiso con nuestro ser.
And to stay with the assignment, because it's going to throw up all kinds of stuff to try to sidetrack you get you off the course.
Y mantenerte en la asignatura, porque va a querer que te muevas de tu asignatura, que dejes todo.
And for me, I just asked him, is this assignment complete? And if he says no, you keep going no matter what it looks like.
Y por ejemplo, para mí, o sea, yo siempre le pregunto, ¿esta asignatura ya está cumplida? Y si me dice que no, sigo en la asignatura.
Because the ego is it's so that desire, do not underestimate the desire for the experience of delusion.
No puedes subestimar el deseo del ego del engaño.
And you will not see it until you spent a lot of time joining. You won't see that how insidious it is.
Y no te puedes dar cuenta lo insidioso que es el ego si no te unes con tus compañeros.
It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of light training to even begin to start to see how insidious the desire for guilt is.
Y tienes que ver lo insidioso que es al comienzo.
It takes a lot of light training to see.
Exige muchísimo compromiso y entrenamiento en la luz.
And ego, it's just arrogance. It's going to say, I know, I hear something different with Jesus.
Y el ego va a decir, no escucho algo diferente de Jesús.
The ego's favorite sentence is, my guidance is this.
Y la frase favorita del ego es, mi guía es.
See, as soon as there's a me in there, it's not guidance.
Y si hay la palabra mi, no hay guía.
If you want to hear him, he is here to help in so many ways. As the beings here, just having conversations with him all day.
Y Y si hay compromiso de escucharlo, lo escucharás. Por ejemplo, aquí los seres que están en el centro.
Those that are committed to it will hear him and speak to him.
Y ellos están comprometidos con escuchar y hearing and
Speak to him.
Hablarle.
The whole purpose of the new covenant is to remind every course student, I am here to lead you out of the world.
Y el mensaje para todos los estudiantes del curso en que viene Jesús es, yo estoy aquí para sacarte fuera de la ilusión.
One of my favorite quotes from him that he told me was,
una de las frases favoritas que él me dijo,
the only thing you can be sure of in this world
la única cosa de la que puedes estar seguro en este mundo
is I am here to lead you out of it.
Es que yo estoy aquí para sacarte de él.
What a promise.
Qué promesa.
So the question is not why can't I hear?
La pregunta es
Why can't I hear?
La pregunta es no ¿por qué no te puedo escuchar?
It's what desire do I have?
Es cuál deseo tengo
not to hear what's natural to me.
De no escuchar lo que es natural para mí.
What desire do I have?
¿Qué deseo tengo?
To keep guilt more than I want God.
De mantener la culpa más que a Dios.
And then you're just opening the gate for Jesus to come in and help.
Y así estás abriendo la puerta a Jesús para que venga y te ayude.
And to show the addiction to guilt in the mind.
Y te muestre la adicción de la culpa en la mente.
Like it's the little precious.
Como el precious de...
Until you spend time with Jesus really in this deep looking. Until you spend time with Jesus in deep looking.
Hasta que no dediques tiempo con Jesús para mirar profundamente.
You won't see it.
No lo verás. No verás el golo.
It's deep, deep play in the delusion.
Es un juego profundo en el engaño.
You can just start watching the play, not to judge the play, but you can learn a lot and just ask him about it. Is this true, Jesus?
Puedes simplemente mirar el juego y comenzar a preguntarle a Jesús, ¿esto es cierto, Jesús?
And you'll also start asking him, did I follow you?
Y incluso le puedes comenzar a preguntar, ¿te he seguido, Jesús?
Did I follow you fully?
¿Te estoy siguiendo, Jesús, completamente?
I told the story here about how I went shopping at Walmart.
Y yo he contado aquí la historia de cómo fui un día a hacer un mercado en Walmart.
And that cart was full of hundreds of items. It was full to the brim.
Y el carro estaba lleno de productos.
Okay, and then I said, okay, Jesus, did I follow you on everything?
Y le pregunté a Jesús, ¿te seguí en toda esta compra?
He said, no, you bought the chicken.
Y me dijo, no, tú compraste el pollo.
And I knew he was right.
Y yo sabía que eso era verdad, que eso no estaba en guía.
And it's really beautiful. It's like, I mean, I'm seeing the reflections, how beautiful it is when like Doug's will come up to me and ask me, did I follow Jesus? And we look together, did I follow Jesus on everything for this shop? Doug's will come up and talk to me. And
Durga fue al mercado y cuando regresó vino a preguntarme acerca de la compra.
And the fruit of that, being willing to ask Jesus, is so enormous.
La voluntad de ver esto con Jesús es enorme.
The willingness to do the end of day review and go, Jesus, have I been following you?
Y la voluntad de preguntarle al finalizar el día, Jesús, ¿te seguí hoy?
The comfort and the love that comes from that.
El confort que viene de esto.
It's reinforcing the commitment to yourself as a divine being.
Es reforzar el compromiso contigo como ser divino.
And to be absolutely clear and true to yourself, to the light of truth within.
y ser totalmente claro contigo mismo.
And it breaks the addiction to guilt
Y romper la adicción a la culpa.
and wanting suffering.
Y que, and one,
And wanting
ok.
suffering.
Y querer, y el deseo del sufrimiento.
And you just commit to yourself to go until he tells you you're done and your mind's clean.
Y compromiso a seguir la asignatura hasta que él diga que está hecha.
And really looking at all those desires not to talk to him.
Y clarificar todos estos deseos, deseo de no querer hablar con él.
This is where peace of mind is.
Eso es la paz de Dios.
This is the fulfillment that every single line in A Course in Miracles is true.
Eso es el hecho de que todas las palabras de un curso de milagros están cumplidas, que son reales.
That God's will is our will for perfect happiness.
Que la voluntad de Dios para nosotros y que ya es que la voluntad de Dios es perfecta felicidad para nosotros.
That He's given us for each other, to be with each other, to go all the way.
Y que ha sido dada para todos, para He was given,
He's given us each other to go all the way.
Y nos está entregando unos a otros para seguir todo el camino.
Will we accept his offer? Will you accept his offer?
¿Aceptarías esta oferta?
Will we make Jesus and the Christ mind the most important thing?
¿Haremos en la mente a Jesús y al Cristo lo más importante?
Will we make the love of God the most important thing to us?
¿Haremos del amor de Dios lo más importante para nosotros?
It's just reminding, just join and keep joining with your brother. Ego's going to protest that.
Solo recuerdo que los invito a unirse, y el ego va a protestar en esto.
It's a big protest of heaven machine.
Es una máquina de protestar.
And really being honesty of God, really being honest. You have to be so honest. Jesus has to tell you where to be honest.
Hay que ser muy honestos y Jesús te tiene que mostrar
because
en qué ser honestos.
The ego will, it's it's so tricky. Oh, it's so tricky.
El ego es muy tramposo.
This is how the ego is going to play when you have guidance.
¿Sería?
This is how the ego is going to play when you have guidance.
Esto es lo que el ego va a jugar cuando sigue la guía.
You'll avoid the guidance, and for a moment you think that you're feeling peace and calm.
Y cuando crees que evades la guía, tú sientes que como que sientes paz y calma.
It's like, wow, I just dodged a bullet.
Es como esquivé la bala.
And all that is relishing guilt and going back and letting the guilt go and dive deeper in the dream and the subconscious mind.
Y lo que estamos haciendo es yendo profundo en la burbuja.
And then you'll feel guilty.
Y luego te sentirás culpable.
All he's trying to do is, the only purpose of the Holy Spirit is to reduce pain and suffering. That's all it's for.
El único propósito del Espíritu Santo es Holy Spirit, you say? Holy Spirit is what?
It's given to reduce pain, to
Okay, es reducir el dolor.
to reduce the amount of pain and suffering, and by showing a quick way out.
Como mostrándonos un camino rápido de salida.
So it's helpful to remember that the ego is going to protest anything that's helpful for healing the mind. You have to say no to it. There just isn't another way.
Tienes que decirle al ego no, porque él va a protestar cualquier ayuda. Sorry, I get lost, sorry.
The ego wants you dead.
El ego te quiere muerto.
And as he told me, he said, you're just tolerating it.
Y él me dice, es que lo estamos tolerando.
I'm glad he was that direct so I could look.
Y estoy agradecida de tener esta dirección y poder ver.
It saves time, that directness.
Y realmente nos ahorra tiempo. Save time, what?
It saves time. Directness saves time.
La dirección nos ahorra tiempo. La guía.
Okay. Kathy, if you'd like to ask a question.
Okay, I thought I'd be low key about it and let you offer.
Puedo dejar hablar.
You know, I'm dealing with a situation right now and a decision which I never thought of in terms of what you just laid out, but I'm wondering if it's an illustration of that. And and I guess I joined with Renee on this afternoon, and
no. Okay, you joined with Renee this afternoon. What about that? Sorry.
So I'm having to make a decision about an upcoming disability hearing, and go ahead.
She has to make a decision about a disability hearing.
Ella está tomando una decisión de algo.
I've had 3.5 months to decide whether to get an attorney and find an attorney, and it wasn't feeling clear, so I just kept putting it off. And at the last minute, I did find one, but I haven't signed the papers. And the decision is whether to keep the appointment and just represent myself, or hire the attorney and postpone it. And the interesting thing is, okay, so I've been in a lot of conflict about it. Logically, it seems like I should hire the attorney because statistically, you know, people win their cases more with an attorney, and I'm terrified of doing it by myself. But I had a moment of clarity last week where I said, okay, decide for me, Holy Spirit, Jesus, decide for me. And I just got really quiet and still. And it's not that I necessarily heard a voice, but it was like all of a sudden a knowing or a clarity that I should I was being guided to represent myself, and but then it quickly faded into a ton of fear, so it's like, so I had a moment of clarity a couple times to guide to just represent myself. And
It feels helpful just to ask what the clear guidance is now. Like, rather than see what happens is the mind will come in, the ego will come in, and it kind of covers over what the real question we need to ask of Jesus.
El ego ella está tomando una decisión de representarse ella misma o contratar a un abogado. Y aquí, que le está preguntando que es importante que miremos cuál es la verdadera pregunta.
Sometimes there's a decision to do something in the mind, and then we want help on the back side of it. But there are no choices being made. It's obscuring what really needs to be seen.
Y es como querer oscurecer algo que se tiene que ver. Entonces, algunas veces se tiene que como sanar algo y después mirar qué se hace.
See, and then we get involved in the mind with a lot of things that are not helpful.
Y luego nos envolvemos en muchas cosas que no son útiles.
So it might be helpful just to back it up to see if it's the hearings actually just in guidance itself.
I'm not sure about that. I just know that Renee, she was kind of getting that the desire to hire the attorney was a way to avoid the fears that were coming up, and that resonated because that seems like the safe route to go.
See,
and that it was an opportunity to look deeply at the.
It feels helpful just to put every idea about this aside. The thing to hear guidance is we have to put every idea we think about everything aside.
Mira, cuando se trata de escuchar la guía, tenemos que poner al lado todas las ideas que creemos que tenemos.
Everything.
Todo.
Put every single idea about everything on the table.
Todo lo que tenemos sobre la mesa hay que ponerlo al lado.
So we can actually remember, Jesus says in chapter 30, a lot of times we decide and then we go to him and then we want him to help us with something that's not helpful. And then we're mad at him because we don't think we hear. He can't help us with he can only point us in the direction of who we are.
Jesús nos puede apuntar solo a la dirección de lo que somos.
So the reason why the play of the ego is to get mad at Jesus, you're not helping me. Well, we've already made a decision. It's not in guidance.
Vamos a Jesús, primero tomamos la decisión de qué hacer y luego vamos a pedirle la guía a Jesús. Entonces eso está fuera de guía.
So really have to, if we really want to hear him, we got to hear him on what he's telling us really is most helpful for healing the mind.
Y si queremos escucharlo, tenemos que escuchar lo que es más sano, lo que es mejor para la sanación de la mente.
And are we willing to hear that? And
estar dispuestos a escuchar eso.
And it probably has nothing to do with this hearing.
Y quizá no tenga que ver nada con esto que se escuchó.
And then we just ask him, okay, Jesus, what is the real thing I need to see here?
¿Cuál es, Jesús, qué es lo que realmente debo ver aquí?
What's the real upset here? What's hidden in the mind here?
¿Cuál es el verdadero molestia aquí? ¿Qué está ocultando?
And he's saying it has nothing to do with this hearing.
Y él dice, no tiene nada que ver con esto que estabas escuchando.
I mean, I have some ideas from what came up today, but I was just wondering if this was an example of, where I did receive guidance and my ego is, trying to talk me out of it.
Lo que estoy mirando es que si fue que escuché la guía y ahora mi ego está queriendo como dudar de eso.
What feels most helpful, or the guidance feels right now, is to look at what is underneath all of this
Y lo
that
que,
needs to be seen.
lo que veo más útil en estos momentos
Yeah.
es que miremos qué hay debajo de esto.
What is he pointing to in the mind that needs healing? What desire needs healing in the mind? But just set aside this, you have to set aside this idea and this concept around this hearing, because that's part of obscuring. You have to put that aside totally. Sometimes because we're so sure that's what it is, but we need to be open enough to let him show us, where am I holding on to guilt in my mind?
Tenemos que ponernos a un lado y dejar que Él nos muestre en qué parte estamos queriendo mantener la culpa.
And it does not relate to this hearing.
Y no está relacionado con este escuchar.
Well, what came up today was the desire to feel a lack of support.
Estoy mirando
Or they're
el
not going to be
deseo de falta
supported.
de soporte.
What I hear is, I can say what I hear if you feel open to it.
Yeah.
Te puedo decir lo que estoy escuchando si tú estás abierta a
The
escuchar.
desire for the experience of weakness.
Estoy escuchando el deseo de la experiencia de debilidad.
Jesus, do I have a desire underneath this for an experience of weakness?
Jesús desea una experiencia por debajo de esto de debilidad.
Yeah, I can feel that.
So then we just look at the relishing of weakness, that's all. And see, admit it. So the beauty is admitting it. Okay, Jesus, you're right. I do relish the experience of weakness.
Ok, Jesús, lo admito, entonces voy al disfrute de este deseo.
Can I release this to a miracle, this relishing of weakness?
Y puedo liberarlo a un milagro, este disfrute de este deseo de debilidad.
And just ask them, we're getting darn honest. It's for all of us. We're getting really honest.
Tenemos que ser muy honestos, esto es para nosotros.
Jesus, am I using this whole thing as a way to continue to play weak?
Y Jesús, estoy usando todo esto para mantener el juego de la debilidad.
Is this whole play here am I using it to keep guilt in the mind?
Estoy usando este juego para mantener la culpa en mi mente.
Is it contributing to the feeling of weakness, the relishing of the experience of weakness? Am I using it to contribute to the experience of weakness?
Estoy usando este deseo de mantener la debilidad.
See, and the play of weakness is how the ego keeps guilt. That's the same. Weakness is one of the ways that the ego keeps guilt alive in the mind.
La debilidad es una forma de las que el ego usa para mantener la culpa en la conciencia, en la mente.
And Jesus, will you show me how I'm using this to keep guilt in my mind? Or am I willing to be honest, and be shown by him how I'm using this to keep guilt in the mind?
Jesús, estoy dispuesta a ver que estoy utilizando la debilidad para mantener la culpa en mi mente.
And Kathy, you can hear him super clearly, so you can ask him, and then you're speaking for all of us.
Y Catherine, tú escuchas muy bien y tú puedes hablar por todos.
I guess what I'm not clear on is, am I using what specifically?
This whole scenario that's come up, is this being used to try to prove that weakness is real?
Estoy usando todo este escenario para mostrar que la debilidad es real.
Well, I heard a yes, but I'm not seeing
Estoy escuchando
much
sí,
more
pero
beyond that.
hay algo más allá de eso.
Okay, Jesus, would you reveal to me how I'm using this scenario to keep guilt in the mind?
Jesús, ¿me podría revelar cómo estoy usando este deseo para mantener la culpa en la mente?
We're willing to see it, Jesus, because this is for all of us.
Tenemos la voluntad de ver, Jesús. Esto es para todos.
I mean, I can see how it is. It's like I can just see how it's just keeping me entrapped like this,
Es como que esto me mantiene atrapada.
it just feels like it's just such an old pattern for me, this fear of making a decision and making the wrong decision. It's like it's just this perpetual nightmare that I live.
Esto es como un patrón que se repite de tener miedo a tomar decisiones.
And it's just the way the ego plays to keep guilt, because guilt always comes from the split mind between two decisions, but they're never real.
Este es el juego del ego porque él juega a dividirlo en dos, como donde se tienen que tomar como dos
Yeah, I
decisiones.
can see that now, how it's just like keeping the guilt in place. I never associated it with guilt before. It was always just about fear, fear of the consequences if I make a wrong decision,
No lo estaba viendo así como culpa, lo veía como simplemente miedo a tomar decisiones.
And it's just really relishing coming up with all the different scenarios and seeing how the ego relishes that we relish these different scenarios, and it creates scenarios that are out of guidance in totality so it can stay in the argument.
El ego juega a crear escenarios para mantener este juego.
So we have to keep going back and going, is this even in guidance what's happening here?
Incluso hay que ir atrás y mirar, ¿esto fue en guía que pasara esto?
When you say, is this even in guidance, what's happening here, you mean the situation in general?
Yes.
Like even applying for disability?
That's ask Jesus. Ask him if that's most helpful for healing the mind. Is that most helpful for healing the mind?
Hay que mirar qué es lo más útil para la sanación de la mente. Ella estaba preguntando si toda la situación había sido en guía.
And Jesus, will I feel more guilt if I go ahead in this? Is this to keep guilt alive in the mind?
Y Jesús mantendría la culpa si sigo adelante con esto, porque ese es el juego.
I'm not seeing it. I'm sure I'm blocked. I have major fear and resistance.
Sí, me siento bloqueada, tengo mucha resistencia.
That's okay, because resistance is going to rise up, but we can say, no, I'd rather hear the truth.
La resistencia va a aparecer cuando
I'd rather hear the truth.
cuando escuchar la verdad, en lugar de escuchar la verdad.
I just not, I don't know. I've been in so much fear and anxiety the last couple of days. It's just so hard to
Es muy duro.
get clear.
Look at the relishing of it, relishing the fear. It's covering over the truth. So you can just say, okay, I'm relishing this, Jesus. Show me what's under it.
Entonces disfruta el miedo y mira a ver qué está cubriendo este miedo.
I'm choosing to distract myself from the truth. So what's really true?
Estoy distrayendo mi ser de la verdad. Muéstrame qué es verdad.
Am I using this scenario to generate more guilt in the mind, to keep guilt in the mind?
Estoy usando este escenario para mantener más culpa, para mantener la culpa en la mente.
I can't say I feel specifically the guilt, but it seems like I'm definitely using it to generate fear and conflict.
Yeah, fear and conflict is like a cover over for guilt.
No estoy segura de que esté generando culpa, pero sí estoy generando miedo y que dice, esto es lo que usas para encubrir la culpa.
They're the cover over to keep guilt.
Es la forma de cubrir la culpa.
They're the defense against really looking to see that, to release the grievance from the mind that keeps the relishing of guilt. You can ask Jesus, Jesus, am I relishing guilt over this?
Jesús, estoy disfrutando esto.
Is this a miscreation to try and keep guilt in the mind?
Esto es creación falsa, tratar de mantener la culpa en la mente.
See, it feeds on itself. When we're out of guidance, it's just feeding the monster. It feeds that monster ego.
Y estar fuera de la guía es alimentar a ese monstruo del ego.
And it's keeping the weakness, the experience, the desire for an experience of weakness. I am being put upon by this situation.
Y es el deseo de mantener la culpa.
Rather than going, oh my gosh, this situation is a desired experience and it's out of guidance.
Y en lugar de ver que esto es una experiencia deseada de estar fuera de la guía.
I'm like, I'm like stuck because that's something I didn't consider. And I mean, I would have to really see it clearly for myself, that if this whole thing is out of guidance or not.
Well, then just stay with the relishing of the guilt for a while. Just say, am I really relishing guilt in this scenario? And just keep releasing that. Stay with that one thing.
Quédate con una sola cosa, quédate con el deseo de la experiencia de la culpa.
And let the mind be cleared of that. Okay, I'm relishing this experience. I'm relishing going into the different scenarios.
Y comienza a disfrutar este deseo de estar por varios escenarios.
Jesus, am I void hearing you on this?
Jesús, estoy evadiendo escucharte en esto.
And just stay with the weakness. Am I relishing weakness in this? And you can just keep looking and just letting the relishing, let him show. And I just stay with the relishing of the experience until it starts burning out. You go all the way down.
Y quédate con el deseo de la debilidad o que sea hasta que se queme.
Okay, well, I'll do that on my own. I don't want to keep people waiting.
Well, it's for all of us. It's something for all of us to look at. We think we're upset for XYZ reason, and it's a great example. We need to show him to show us what the real upset is.
Esto es para todos. Tenemos que dejar que él nos muestre realmente cuál es la molestia.
See, let's just, it's just an example. You can go in and find out what happens is the ego is going to set up a scenario where we're going to seem like we're asking God for help, but what we're really doing is trying to keep the whole scenario alive, because the scenario itself is not helpful.
Y lo que a veces queremos es mantener los escenarios y decimos a Jesús o preguntamos por ayuda, pero realmente queremos mantener los escenarios.
The scenario itself is a miscreation to keep the mind in blankness, preoccupied, and not in divine function.
Y los escenarios son una forma de mantenernos preocupados y no estar en la función divina.
And then it gets used by the ego to defend its position that it's helpless.
Y para el ego keep the position.
The ego uses to defend the position that it's helpless.
Y el ego mantiene esta posición de
It's a decision to have an experience of helplessness and create scenarios that try to prove that helplessness is true.
Es el escenario que usa el ego para la debilidad, para mantener la debilidad.
And so we can't ever get peace of mind. It's because it's so deep inside the illusory experience and trying to prove weakness that it's kind of stuck in the bubble, as it was. It's
como
in loop in the bubble.
En un bucle en la burbuja.
So this brings, and then we're just kind of just racked with guilt. This trying to decide, and what am I going to do? And it just builds these scenarios and stories in the mind.
Y mantener todos estos escenarios, historias en la mente, generan ira.
So we need to be open to Jesus for him to come in and say, okay, let's lay this whole thing aside and let me show you what's what's generating this whole smoke screen.
Y tenemos que dejar que Jesús nos poner todo a un lado y dejar que Él nos muestre qué está generando todo este pantalla de humo.
And then he shows you, okay, here's what you're relishing, here's how you're generating the experience, and here's the guidance that's going to help lead you out of it.
Y él nos va a decir qué está generando esta situación y nos va a ayudar a salir de ella.
But the ego would rather not follow the guidance because it wants to keep the guilt that's in the whole storyline and the whole scenario.
Y el ego va a querer mantener la culpa en todo el escenario.
And it'll say things like, well, I don't really hear the guidance clear. That's just the play. It's not a judgment. It's just for us to see how the ego plays to deny that love's here now.
Y esto es para mostrar y para todos que el ego va a querer mantener este escenario.
So it just goes back to like chapter 30, where he says you've already made a decision about something. And then you want help with the decision that you've already made, but it's out of guidance.
Y vamos nuevamente al capítulo 30 de Un Curso de Milagros, donde nos dice, primero tomamos la decisión y después pedimos ayuda sobre esa decisión, pero la decisión está fuera de guía.
And then a lot of guilt and fear comes up because of it, because the guilt is relished, and then it's like a manufacturer of all this fear and terror, and there's no peace of mind in it.
Y en esto no hay la paz mental porque el ego va a generar esta máquina de generar culpa.
Oh boy.
But you can just keep joining on it, Kathy. If the call of your heart is to have see the truth, then the truth will be revealed.
Sigue uniéndote, Catherine, porque si quieres ver la verdad, la verdad será revelada.
If nothing can stop us from seeing the truth except some delusion that we want to hold on to.
Y nada nos puede parar de ver la verdad a menos que queramos engañarnos.
So this willingness to see and let him interpret it is the way out of the dream.
Dejar que él nos guíe es la salida del sueño.
It is the decision when he guides to no longer indulge in guilt experience.
Y es no ser indulgentes con la culpa.
And the ego is going to scream its little lungs out.
Y el ego va a gritar.
Because remember, its function is to protest every single thing that's offered by the spirit that's helpful for healing the mind.
Y recuerden que la función del ego es protestar cualquier cosa que haga el espíritu para la sanación de la mente.
We have to start saying no, and when's a better time than now?
Y tenemos que parar de decir no, y qué mejor tiempo que ahora.
So thank you for your question, Kathy.
Gracias por tu pregunta, Catherine. Katy.
We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for a beautiful session, really looking deeply. That was a great example to look deeply at how guilt plays to keep it in the mind.
Gracias por esta hermosa sesión donde vemos cómo es el juego del ego para mantener la culpa.
And how really listening and following him is the way out to release that.
Y cómo el escuchar y seguir la voz es la forma de salir de esto.
Go for God.
Vamos por Dios.
We love you.
Bye.